Poor widow begged for work, rancher growled. Only job here is warming my bed. The sun was just rising over the dusty horizon when Maria, a poor widow, stepped onto the rough dirt road leading to the outskirts of town. She carried nothing but a small, worn-out bag and the weight of her own exhaustion. Her husband had passed away suddenly last year, leaving her with no money, no family to turn to, and a tiny, crumbling house that she could barely keep warm. Hunger gnawed at her stomach every day, but it was the loneliness that hurt her the most. Every time she remembered his kind eyes, the life they had dreamed of together seemed farther away than the horizon itself. She had walked many miles that morning, moving from one farm to another, hoping to find work. She tried not to let the stares of the farmers make her feel small. She had learned to hold her head high even when people whispered about her behind her back. Most of the farmers told her the same thing. There was no work to be found, or worse, they shook their heads and said that she was not strong enough for farm labor. Maria's arms were thin, her hands rough from years of washing, scrubbing, and cooking, but her spirit refused to break. She was determined to survive, not just for herself, but for the memory of her husband and the promise she had made to keep going, no matter how hard life became. The path led her past fields of golden wheat swaying gently in the morning breeze. Birds flew above, singing as if they had no worries at all. Maria envied them for a moment, wishing she could soar above her troubles and leave all her sorrows behind. But there was no way to escape the reality that waited for her at the end of this long, dusty road. Finally, she came to the edge of the largest ranch she had ever seen. The gates were tall, made of strong iron bars, and polished to a shine that reflected the sunlight. The house on the property was enormous, with a porch that wrapped around it like a protective arm. Smoke curled from the chimneys, promising warmth and a place to rest. For a moment, Maria allowed herself to hope. Perhaps this ranch would be different. Perhaps someone here would see her as more than a poor, desperate widow and would offer her the honest work she craved. She took a deep breath, adjusted the strap of her bag, and walked up to the main entrance. Her shoes were scuffed and her dress was faded, but she held herself as best she could. When the rancher stepped out onto the porch, she felt her courage falter. He was a large man with a stern face and sharp eyes that seemed to weigh every person they fell upon. He looked her up and down, his gaze lingering a moment too long, and Maria felt a pang of fear. But she pushed it aside, reminding herself why she had come. She had to try. She had to ask. "Good morning, sir," she said, her voice trembling slightly, but steady enough. "My name is Maria. I've come looking for work. Anything at all I can do. I just need a place to earn my living." The rancher's eyes narrowed, and for a moment Maria thought he would simply ignore her. Then he let out a low laugh, one that sounded cruel and mocking. "Work?" he repeated, his voice rough. "You? On this ranch? The only job here is warming my bed." The words hit Maria like a blow. She felt her stomach twist, and for a heartbeat, she could not speak. Shock and shame threatened to overwhelm her, but she took a deep breath and reminded herself that she did not deserve his ridicule. She had faced hardship her entire life and had survived. She would survive this too. I am only asking for work, sir," she said quietly. "I can cook, clean, mend clothes, do anything you need. Please, I only ask for a chance to earn my living honestly." The rancher shrugged and turned away, clearly uninterested in her plea. Maria's heart sank, but she refused to leave without a final effort. She looked around, hoping for someone else to intervene, but the workers nearby seemed either afraid or indifferent. Fear had a way of silencing everyone around. Cruelty. Maria realized that no one would speak for her here. She was on her own. With a heavy heart, she stepped back and lowered her eyes, feeling the sting of humiliation. But as she walked away, something inside her refused to break. She reminded herself that one cruel man's words did not define her. She was a widow, yes, but she was also strong, resourceful, and brave. She had faced life's hardest moments and had survived. She would find work elsewhere, somewhere she was respected and treated with dignity. As she walked down the road, Maria remembered her husband's words. No matter what happens, you have to keep moving forward. Life may be cruel, but you are stronger than you think. She whispered them to herself, letting the memory give her courage. Her steps were slower now, tired from the long journey and the emotional weight of the morning. But she did not stop. She would keep going. The sun climbed higher in the sky, casting long shadows over the fields. Farmers she passed offered little more than sympathetic looks. Some shook their heads as if to say, "There's no hope here." Maria's hands ached from carrying her bag, and her feet felt blistered, but she focused on one thing. She must find a place that would allow her to survive. Somewhere, there must be kindness waiting. By late afternoon, Maria reached a small cluster of homes near a creek. She paused for a moment, letting the cool water refresh her hands and face. She drank sparingly, savoring the taste of relief. As she looked around, she noticed a woman tending to a small garden. Summoning her courage once more, Maria approached. "Excuse me," she said softly. "I'm looking for work. Anything at all. I am willing to work hard, and I only ask for an honest chance to earn my living." The woman looked at Maria with kind eyes. "You've been traveling far, haven't you?" she asked. "You look weary." Maria nodded. "I have. I've asked at many farms, but no one will give me a chance. I don't know where else to go." The woman studied her for a moment and then smiled gently. "I can't hire you for long-term work, but I know a family nearby who might need help. They are honest people and will treat you with respect." Maria's heart lifted slightly. For the first time that day, she felt a glimmer of hope. Perhaps, after all, there were good people left in the world. She thanked the woman sincerely and promised to visit the family as soon as she could. For now, she sat by the creek, letting herself rest for a while. She allowed herself to dream of a future where she could earn her living without fear or humiliation. As the sun began to set, Maria looked toward the horizon. She had no home, no money, and no family left. But she still had hope. She still had her courage. And as long as she had that, she knew she could survive. She would find work, she would rebuild her life, and she would never let anyone diminish her worth again. That night, she slept under the open sky, wrapped in a thin blanket she had brought with her. The stars shone brightly above, as if offering her silent encouragement. Maria closed her eyes and whispered a quiet promise to herself. She would not give up, no matter how many doors were slammed in her face. She would find a place where she could live with dignity and respect. And one day, she would tell the world that even a poor widow could rise above cruelty, armed only with courage, hope, and an unbroken spirit. The next morning, Maria woke early, her body stiff from sleeping under the open sky. Her stomach growled, reminding her of the emptiness she had carried for so long. She knew she could not linger near the creek forever. The world demanded action, and she needed work to survive. Gathering her courage, she set out again, her bag light but her spirit heavy with worry. The road led her past fields and pastures, where horses grazed lazily and the distant sound of cattle lowed softly. She had walked this path before, but today it felt different. Today she felt the weight of urgency pressing on her shoulders. Each step reminded her that time was slipping away. She had survived so much, yet survival alone was not enough. She wanted to live, to find a place where she could belong and earn an honest living. Eventually, she arrived at the large ranch she had seen yesterday. It looked even more imposing in the morning light. The iron gates gleamed, and the house on the property stood tall and proud. Maria's heart sank as memories of the rancher's cruel laugh came back to her. She remembered his words, the ones that had cut deep into her pride. "The only job here is warming my bed." Her hands trembled slightly as she adjusted her bag on her shoulder. She knew she could not return to him for help. Yet, curiosity and hope mixed in her heart. Perhaps there was something more she had overlooked yesterday. As she approached the porch, Maria noticed activity around the ranch. Workers moved with purpose, carrying tools, tending animals, and repairing fences. Their faces were tired, but most of them ignored her. A few glanced briefly, their eyes wary, as if afraid to speak up. She realized that the rancher's power extended beyond his words. It reached into the minds of those around him, creating fear and silence. Summoning her courage once more, she walked to the edge of the porch where the rancher himself was inspecting the workers. He was a large man, his shoulders broad, his expression stern. His eyes scanned her as if weighing her worth in a single glance. Maria felt a lump in her throat but refused to step back. She would not let fear dictate her actions. "Good morning, sir," she said, her voice shaking but firm. "I am Maria. I came here yesterday asking for work. I only want to do honest work. I can cook, clean, mend clothes, or help with chores. Anything you need, I can do it. Please, give me a chance." The rancher paused, his gaze sharpening as he looked her over. Then, without a hint of kindness, he let out a low, harsh laugh. "Work?" he said, his voice cold. "You? The only job here is warming my bed." Maria froze, her heart sinking. The words hit her like a physical blow. Shame and humiliation surged through her, but she refused to give him the satisfaction of seeing her crumble completely. She drew a deep breath and held her head high, even though her chest felt heavy with sorrow. I only asked for work, sir," she said quietly, her voice trembling but steady. "I am not asking for anything else. I only want to earn my living honestly. Please, I beg you, give me a chance." The rancher's expression did not change. He turned away, clearly uninterested, and barked an order at one of the nearby workers. Maria realized then that there was no hope of changing his mind. He was a man who valued power and control above all else, and he would never see her as anything more than someone to mock. Her eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them away. She would not cry in front of him. She would not give him the satisfaction of seeing her broken. Slowly, she turned and stepped away from the porch. Each step felt heavier than the last, as if the world itself was pressing down on her. She could feel the eyes of the workers on her, some filled with curiosity, others with fear. No one spoke, no one offered help. As Maria walked down the path leading away from the ranch, she remembered her husband's words. "Life may be cruel, but you are stronger than you think." She whispered them to herself, letting them steady her trembling hands. She refused to let this man's cruelty define her. She refused to let it steal her dignity. She found a quiet spot under a large oak tree where she could sit and rest. Her body was tired from walking, and her heart was heavy with the sting of humiliation. Yet, in the stillness, she felt a small flicker of determination. She had survived worse. She had faced loss, hunger, and loneliness. She could survive this too. As she sat there, she noticed a woman walking along a nearby path. The woman carried a basket of vegetables and looked to be heading toward the town. Seeing Maria sitting alone, she paused and smiled gently. "You've had a long journey, haven't you?" the woman said kindly. "You look tired and hungry." Maria nodded. "Yes, ma'am. I've been looking for work everywhere, but no one will give me a chance. I... The woman studied her for a moment, her eyes soft with understanding. "I can see that you are honest and strong," she said. "I don't have much to offer, but I know a family nearby who might need help. They are good people and will treat you with respect. If you wish, I can show you the way." Hope sparked in Maria's heart. For the first time since she had faced the rancher's cruel words, she felt a sense of possibility. Perhaps there were still kind people in the world. Perhaps she could find a place where she would be valued for her hard work and honesty. She followed the woman along a narrow path, past fields of corn and small orchards. The sun shone brightly, warming her face and lifting her spirits slightly. She listened to the woman talk about the family, about how they valued honesty and dedication. Maria felt a sense of relief she had not known in months. She would not have to beg or face cruelty again. There was a chance for her to start over, to rebuild her life with her own hands. As they approached the family's small farm, Maria saw children playing near the house and animals moving peacefully in the yard. The family greeted them warmly, and Maria felt a sense of belonging she had not felt in a long time. They offered her food and water immediately, and she sat down to eat, savoring each bite as if it were a treasure. While she ate, Maria explained her situation. She spoke of her husband, of the hardships she had faced, and of her determination to work honestly. The family listened with care, nodding and offering words of encouragement. They asked her about her skills and assured her that they had chores she could help with right away. By the end of the afternoon, Maria had already begun working alongside them. She helped with cooking, cleaning, and tending the small garden. Though her muscles ached from long years of hardship, she felt a sense of pride in her work. For the first time in weeks, she felt useful, valued, and respected. That evening, as the sun set behind the hills, Maria sat outside the small farmhouse, looking at the horizon. She felt a quiet strength growing inside her. The rancher's cruel words still haunted her, but they no longer held power over her. She had found people who treated her with dignity, who respected her for who she was, and she knew that she could survive and thrive without anyone's approval. She thought about the journey ahead, about the work she would continue to do, and about the life she could rebuild from the ground up. She felt hope for the first time in months, and with that hope came determination. No matter what hardships lay ahead, she would not give up. She would continue to walk forward, step by step, toward a future that she could shape with her own hands. Maria closed her eyes for a moment, feeling the cool evening breeze on her face. She whispered a quiet promise to herself. "I will survive. I will rebuild. I will find dignity and respect, no matter how many doors are closed in my face." And with that promise, she felt a renewed strength in her heart, ready to face whatever the next day would bring. Days passed since Maria had been turned away at the large ranch. She had found temporary work at a small family farm nearby, but her thoughts kept drifting back to the cruel rancher. She could not forget his words, the coldness in his eyes, or the way the workers had avoided her gaze, silent and fearful. The memory of that moment had left a mark on her heart, not just because of the humiliation, but because she had seen how fear could silence everyone around cruelty. One morning, as she tended the small garden for the family who had welcomed her, she noticed a figure walking along the dirt road near the ranch. It was one of the older workers from the large property, a man named Thomas. He had worked there for years, quietly observing the way the rancher treated people, animals, and even the land itself. Thomas was respected among the workers for his fairness and experience, but he had always been cautious. Speaking out could cost him his job or worse. Today, however, Thomas was not cautious. He carried a small notebook and looked troubled, pacing near the edge of the field. Maria, sensing his worry, approached him gently. "Good morning, sir," she said softly. "Are you all right?" Thomas looked at her and gave a small, sad smile. "I've been thinking," he said, "thinking about how the rancher treats people, especially women who come here looking for work. I saw what happened to you. I saw the cruelty, and I cannot forget it." Maria's heart sank and then lifted at the same time. She had expected no one to remember, no one to care. You saw it?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Thomas nodded. "I did. I did not speak at the time, afraid of what he might do. But I have seen this too many times. People leaving in shame, people afraid to ask for help, people forced to endure humiliation just to survive. I can't remain silent anymore." Maria felt a small spark of hope. Perhaps her suffering had not been in vain. Perhaps someone's courage could make a difference, even in a place dominated by fear. She listened as Thomas explained his plan. He did not want revenge, nor did he want to humiliate the rancher publicly. He simply wanted to ensure that no one else would suffer as she had, and to hold the rancher accountable for his cruelty. "People need to know the truth," Thomas said. "They need to see how he treats those who ask for honest work. I will speak to the local community leaders, to the Farmers Association, and to anyone who will listen. If nothing else, the rancher will no longer be able to hide behind fear." Maria nodded, feeling a sense of relief. For the first time, she realized that her story, her pain, could become a force for change. She had endured the humiliation silently, but now her experience might prevent others from facing the same fate. It gave her a sense of purpose she had not felt since her husband passed away. Meanwhile, the rancher continued his daily routines, unaware that the first seeds of change were beginning to take root. He went about his work with the same stern expression, issuing orders to the workers and inspecting the land. But Thomas had already begun speaking quietly to other workers, encouraging them to share their experiences of unfair treatment. Slowly, the silence that had protected the rancher's cruelty began to crack. One by one, the workers began to confide in Thomas. Some spoke of unpaid overtime, others of harsh punishments for minor mistakes, and a few even shared stories of being treated with disrespect and intimidation. Thomas took careful notes, ensuring that every account was accurate. He knew that if he were to bring this to the local authorities, the evidence would need to be strong. As the days went by, the stories spread beyond the ranch. Farmers in neighboring towns began to hear about the way the rancher treated those who came seeking honest work. Some expressed sympathy, others anger, and a few even offered Maria temporary jobs and assistance if she needed it. The community began to rally quietly, creating a network of support that made it harder for the rancher to continue his behavior unnoticed. Maria, meanwhile, continued her work at the small family farm. She tended the garden, cared for the animals, and helped with household chores. Each day she grew stronger, not just physically, but emotionally. The support from Thomas and the kindness of the family reminded her that not everyone in the world was cruel. There were good people willing to help, willing to stand up for what was right. One afternoon, as she rested under a tree after a morning of work, Thomas arrived with a determined look on his face. "Maria," he said, "I've spoken to several local leaders. They are concerned and want to investigate. They've agreed to visit the ranch and see for themselves. They want to ensure that no one else is treated the way you were." Maria felt a mix of emotions: relief, hope, and a hint of fear. She knew that change would not come easily. The rancher was powerful, and he had held control over the workers for many years. But she also knew that the truth had a power of its own. It could not be ignored forever. As evening fell, Maria reflected on the journey she had taken. She remembered walking the dusty roads, her stomach empty and her heart heavy, only to be turned away by cruelty. Now, months later, she saw that even small acts of courage could have a ripple effect. Thomas's decision to speak out, the community's willingness to listen, and her own perseverance had begun to change the narrative. That night, as she lay in her small, warm room at the family farm, Maria felt a sense of peace. She had survived the cruelty of one man, but she had also witnessed the strength of others. She realized that life, though often harsh and unfair, could also offer moments of unexpected support and kindness. She promised herself that she would continue to work hard, to live with dignity, and to help others whenever she could. Days turned into weeks, and the news of the investigation began to reach the ranch. The rancher, once untouchable, started to notice the change. Workers were less willing to follow unfair orders, and visitors arrived asking questions about the treatment of employees. Slowly, the walls of fear that had protected him for years began to crumble. Maria continued her life quietly, focusing on her work and rebuilding her strength. She knew that she had done nothing wrong, and that her perseverance and honesty had set a chain of events into motion that would protect others. She found joy in the small victories: seeing a plant flourish in the garden, watching an animal grow healthy under her care, and feeling the gratitude of the family who had taken her in. Through it all, she never forgot the lesson she had learned. Courage could come in many forms, whether it was standing up to cruelty, helping someone in need, or simply surviving with dignity. She realized that her journey was not just about finding work or escaping humiliation. It was about discovering her own strength and the power of human kindness. As the weeks passed, Maria noticed a subtle but profound change in herself. She walked with her head held high, spoke with confidence, and treated others with patience and respect. Her experience had taught her empathy, and she became a source of encouragement for those who faced difficulties of their own. People began to seek her advice, knowing that she had endured hardship and emerged stronger. And though the memory of the rancher's cruelty never fully faded, it no longer held power over her. It had become a part of her story, a reminder of the obstacles she had overcome and the resilience she had discovered within herself. She had survived humiliation, found support in unexpected places, and helped set the stage for justice and accountability. Maria understood, more than ever, that life was not only about enduring hardship, but also about creating change. One small act of courage, one voice willing to speak the truth, could make a difference. She had seen it with Thomas, and she knew that the ripple of goodness would continue to grow, spreading hope and protection to others who might find themselves in her shoes one day. As she prepared for bed that night, Maria felt a quiet sense of fulfillment. She had faced cruelty and found her own strength. She had witnessed courage in others and allowed it to inspire her. And she knew, deep in her heart, that she was no longer just a poor widow seeking survival. She was a woman with purpose, resilience, and the power to make a difference in the lives of others. Weeks had passed since Thomas had begun quietly sharing the truth about the rancher. Slowly, the community had started to take notice. Farmers from nearby towns, local business owners, and even the heads of workers' associations had begun asking questions. The rancher, once confident in his power and control, began to feel a subtle but growing pressure. He noticed workers hesitating to follow orders, neighbors looking at him differently, and strangers arriving with questions about how he treated people seeking honest work. The walls of fear that had protected him for so long were beginning to crack. Meanwhile, Maria continued her work at the small family farm. She rose early each day, tending to the garden, caring for animals, and assisting with household chores. Her hands were rough from labor, but they were hands that had learned resilience. Each task she completed reminded her of her strength, and each kind word she received reminded her that the world could still hold goodness. Despite her busy days, her thoughts often drifted back to the large ranch. She had never wanted revenge, but she understood now that her story had a purpose beyond her own survival. It could bring justice, or at least accountability, to a place that had known only fear. One afternoon, Maria was walking along the farm's small stream when Thomas arrived, his face serious yet determined. "Maria," he said, "the local council and some farmers are planning to visit the ranch tomorrow. They want to see things for themselves and make sure no one else is mistreated. They've been hearing from other workers, too. They believe your story and want to act." Maria's heart raced. Part of her feared what might happen if the rancher learned about the investigation, but another part of her felt a growing sense of relief. Finally, there was a chance for justice, not through anger or confrontation, but through truth and accountability. She nodded quietly, feeling a mix of nervousness and hope. The next morning, the group arrived at the ranch. Maria stayed back, allowing Thomas and the investigators to take the lead. From a distance, she watched as the rancher greeted them with his usual stern expression, attempting to mask any sign of concern. But Maria could see the tension in his posture, the way his eyes darted from one person to another, and the subtle clenching of his fists. He knew he was being watched in a way he had not been before, and it unsettled him. The council members and local farmers asked questions of the ranch workers, carefully listening to their answers. The workers, many of whom had been silent for years, now spoke with newfound courage. They described harsh treatment, unfair orders, and the humiliation that Maria had endured. Thomas stood nearby, supporting the workers and providing his own observations. Slowly but surely, the truth became clear. The rancher's cruelty could no longer be hidden behind fear and silence. The investigators asked more questions, took notes, and made plans to follow up to ensure fair treatment for all workers. Maria watched from a distance, her heart swelling with a mixture of pride and relief. She had endured suffering, but her experience had sparked a movement that could protect others in the future. After the investigation, the rancher's power began to wane. Workers left the ranch, seeking employment where they would be treated fairly. Business partners and neighbors began to distance themselves, realizing that continuing to associate with him could damage their own reputations. Slowly, the once feared man found himself isolated. For the first time, he felt the weight of his own actions, and for the first time, he could not simply rely on fear to maintain control. Maria, meanwhile, continued to build her life at the small family farm. She was no longer just surviving. She was thriving. Her skills had improved, and her confidence had grown. She took pride in her work and found joy in small victories, a healthy garden, animals thriving under her care, and the gratitude of the family who had given her a chance. The kindness and trust they offered reminded her that life could still be fair and rewarding. One evening, as Maria prepared a simple meal for the family, she reflected on the events of the past weeks. She realized that her journey had taught her more than she could have imagined. She had learned the power of resilience, the importance of standing up for truth, and the value of community support. Most importantly, she had learned that even in the face of cruelty, kindness and courage could prevail. Thomas visited her again, this time with a lighter expression. "Maria," he said, "your story has made a difference. The council is monitoring the ranch, and the workers are no longer afraid to speak up. People are realizing that cruelty has consequences. Your courage has helped them find their own." Maria smiled quietly. She had never sought recognition or reward. She had only wanted to survive, to live with dignity. Yet, seeing the positive change her experience had inspired filled her with a deep sense of fulfillment. She understood now that her suffering had not been meaningless. It had sparked hope and change in a place that had known only fear. The rancher, once feared and powerful, was now a shadow of the man he had been. Isolated and mistrusted, he began to face the consequences of his actions. No longer could he command obedience through fear alone. He had underestimated the power of truth, the resilience of those he sought to oppress, and the courage of even one person willing to speak out. Maria continued her work at the farm, but her thoughts often turned to the larger lessons she had learned. She realized that life was not just about enduring hardship. It was about using one's experiences to create positive change. She began mentoring young women in the community, teaching them skills for work, self-reliance, and resilience. She shared her story carefully, emphasizing the importance of courage, honesty, and the power of standing up for oneself and others. The family who had taken her in watched her growth with pride. They saw not just a worker, but a woman who had overcome immense challenges and emerged stronger, wiser, and more compassionate. Maria had become a symbol of perseverance, showing that even in the darkest moments, hope and courage could shine through. One afternoon, as she walked through the fields she tended, Maria noticed children playing nearby. Their laughter reminded her of simpler times, and she felt a deep sense of peace. She realized that the fear and humiliation she had endured had shaped her, but they did not define her. Her resilience, kindness, and determination had created a life filled with purpose and fulfillment. She reflected on the chain of events that had led to this point: the cruelty of the rancher, the silent observation of Thomas, the courage of the workers, and the support of the family that had welcomed her. Each moment had been a piece of a larger story, a story that demonstrated the power of truth, justice, and community. As evening approached, Maria sat under a tree, looking at the horizon. She felt a quiet sense of accomplishment. The rancher's cruelty no longer held power over her, and her life had taken a path she could be proud of. She understood that life could be harsh, but it could also offer opportunities for growth, redemption, and connection. She had survived, and in surviving, she had helped others do the same. Maria's story became known in the community not as a tale of suffering, but as a story of courage and resilience. People admired her for her strength, her honesty, and her ability to rise above adversity. Her experience inspired others to speak up, to support one another, and to recognize that cruelty and injustice could not last forever. Through it all, Maria remained humble. She did not seek attention or praise. She focused on her work, her growth, and the well-being of those around her. She understood that true strength lay not in dominating others, but in living with integrity, helping those in need, and remaining steadfast in the face of challenges. And as she watched the sun set over the fields she tended, Maria felt a deep sense of fulfillment. The hardships of the past had shaped her, but they had not defeated her. She had learned that courage, honesty, and perseverance could create lasting change. She had discovered that one person's strength could inspire an entire community, and that even in the face of cruelty, life could be fair, kind, and rewarding. Months had passed since Maria had first been turned away at the large ranch. Her life had changed completely, yet she remembered that day as if it had happened yesterday. The memory of the rancher's cruel words still lingered, but they no longer held power over her. Instead, they served as a reminder of how far she had come and how strong she had become. She had survived hunger, humiliation, and loneliness, and in doing so, she had discovered courage she had never known she possessed. Maria woke early one morning, as she did every day, and stepped outside into the soft light of dawn. The small farm where she now worked was alive with sound. The gentle clucking of chickens, the lowing of cows in the pasture, and the quiet rustle of wind through the trees. She inhaled deeply, feeling the cool air fill her lungs. There was peace here, a calm she had not known in a long time, and it filled her with gratitude. As she began her morning chores, Maria reflected on the journey that had brought her to this place. She remembered the dusty roads, the empty stomachs, and the fear she had carried. She thought of the cruel rancher and the humiliation she had endured. But she also thought of Thomas, who had spoken up, and of the family who had taken her in when no one else would. Each memory was a reminder of both the hardships and the kindness that had shaped her path. The days at the farm were busy but fulfilling. Maria tended to the animals, worked in the fields, cooked meals, and repaired fences. Her hands were rough and calloused, but each task brought a sense of accomplishment. She felt a quiet pride in the work she did, knowing that it was honest and meaningful. More importantly, she felt valued. The family treated her with respect, trusting her skills and appreciating her efforts. For the first time in months, Maria felt a true sense of belonging. Word of her courage and perseverance had spread quietly throughout the surrounding community. People admired her resilience, not because she had sought attention, but because she had lived with honesty and integrity in the face of hardship. Local women began seeking her advice, asking how she had managed to survive and rebuild her life. Maria welcomed them warmly, sharing practical skills like farming, cooking, and sewing, but also offering lessons in patience, hope, and self-respect. She had learned that strength was not just about surviving, it was about helping others rise as well. The rancher, once feared and powerful, had faded into isolation. His cruelty could no longer be hidden, and the community had held him accountable. Workers had left, partners had withdrawn support, and neighbors viewed him with suspicion. He realized too late that fear was a fragile tool, and that once trust and respect were lost, power crumbled quickly. No longer could he intimidate people or demand obedience. The same man who had once laughed cruelly at Maria now stood alone, a cautionary reminder of the consequences of arrogance and cruelty. Maria did not rejoice in his downfall. She had never sought revenge or wished harm on anyone. Her focus had always been on survival and rebuilding her life with dignity. Yet she could not deny the quiet satisfaction of knowing that justice had been served. The world had a way of balancing itself, and the truth, once revealed, had the power to protect the innocent and humble the proud. As the months turned into seasons, Maria's life continued to grow stronger. She had saved a small amount of money from her work at the farm, enough to make modest improvements to her living space. She had planted a larger garden, allowing her to provide fresh vegetables for the family, and even sell a few at the local market. Her skills and confidence had grown, and she had become a reliable and respected member of the small community. One afternoon, Maria noticed a group of children playing near the edge of the farm. Their laughter echoed across the fields, bright and carefree. Watching them, she felt a sense of hope for the future. She realized that her life, once consumed by struggle and uncertainty, now held promise and potential. She could teach, mentor, and inspire others. She could live with dignity, and in doing so, she could help others find their own strength. In the evenings, Maria often sat outside under the old oak tree at the edge of the farm, watching the sun dip below the horizon. The sky was painted in hues of orange and pink, and the gentle breeze carried the scent of earth and flowers. She thought about her journey, the suffering, the courage, the kindness, and the growth. She realized that life was a series of challenges and opportunities, and how one responded to them defined who they were. Maria felt a quiet determination settle in her heart. She would continue to work hard, to live honestly, and to support others whenever she could. She understood that true fulfillment came not from wealth or recognition, but from integrity, resilience, and the connection she built with those around her. Her life had been reshaped not by luck, but by her own courage and the kindness of those who had supported her along the way. The small family she worked for had become more than employers. They were friends, confidants, and a source of comfort. They celebrated her achievements, encouraged her dreams, and supported her in every way possible. Maria, in turn, gave them her loyalty, her hard work, and her heart. Together, they built a life filled with trust, respect, and quiet happiness. Maria also began to mentor other women who were struggling in their own lives. She taught them practical skills for survival, but she also emphasized the importance of self-respect and resilience. She shared her story carefully, highlighting the courage it took to survive and the power of seeking help from those willing to offer it. Many women who had once felt hopeless began to see a path forward, inspired by Maria's example. Through her actions, Maria discovered that hardship could become a source of strength. Her experiences had taught her empathy, patience, and wisdom. She had learned that cruelty could be overcome, not by anger, but by perseverance and honesty. She had also learned that kindness, when offered freely, could transform lives, not just for herself, but for everyone she touched. Years later, Maria's story became known throughout the small region. People spoke of the widow who had faced humiliation, endured hardship, and yet emerged stronger and wiser. She had become a symbol of resilience, a living reminder that even in the face of adversity, hope and determination could prevail. Her life was a testament to the fact that dignity and courage were far more powerful than fear or cruelty. Even the rancher's story faded into memory, a cautionary tale of arrogance and mistreatment. He had once been feared, but the truth had stripped him of his power. Maria, on the other hand, had built a life of respect, trust, and fulfillment. She had faced life's worst challenges and had not only survived but had grown stronger because of them. As she watched the sun set over the fields she cared for, Maria reflected on her journey with a sense of peace. She understood that life would always present challenges, but she also knew that courage, honesty, and perseverance could overcome even the darkest moments. She had survived poverty, loneliness, and humiliation, and she had transformed those experiences into a life filled with purpose and hope. Maria whispered a quiet promise to herself, a promise that had carried her through so many hardships. I will continue to live with courage. I will continue to work honestly. I will help others whenever I can, and I will never forget that hope and kindness are stronger than cruelty and fear. And with that promise, Maria closed her eyes, feeling the warm evening breeze on her face. She knew that her journey was far from over, but she also knew that she had the strength to face whatever lay ahead. She had rebuilt her life from the ground up, and in doing so, she had discovered the true meaning of resilience, dignity, and hope. Her story, once filled with suffering, was now a story of triumph. A poor widow who had begged for work had not only survived, but she had helped others, inspired a community, and proven that courage, integrity, and kindness could change the course of life. She had faced cruelty and emerged victorious, not through vengeance, but through perseverance, compassion, and unwavering strength. Maria's life, though simple and quiet, had become a beacon of hope. She had transformed hardship into opportunity, pain into wisdom, and fear into courage. She had lived through life's harshest trials and had emerged stronger, not just for herself, but for everyone around her. And in the end, that was the greatest victory of all.